teenage girl slouched in the corner of the clinic's waiting room, her red hoodie pulled tight around her shoulders as if it could shield her from more than just the late afternoon chill. She avoided her father's eyes, her gaze darting to the floor tiles in restless, repeating patterns. Every few seconds, she twisted the cuff of her sleeve, her fingers trembling against the soft fabric. At first glance, it looked like the usual pre-appointment jitters, the kind that make hands sweat and hearts race. But when you worked in a family practice long enough, you learned to spot something deeper behind a patient's nerves. Outside, the early evening light bathed Santa Rosa's broad streets in a warm, golden glow. Nestled in Sonoma County's rolling vineyards, the town was home to tidy suburban neighborhoods and Dr. Evan Lam's modest clinic, which had become a trusted fixture in the community over the past few years. At 52, Dr. Lam had earned a reputation as the go-to doctor for families, welcoming toddlers with scraped knees, and then decades later, their own children, now parents themselves, worried about their teenagers' health. As he stepped out of the examination room, he glanced at his watch, noting that closing time was fast approaching. He carried a small leather eyeglass case toward the nurse's station, where Rosa Delgado was already finishing her charting for the day. "Rosa, this was left behind by Mrs. Hernandez," he said, placing the case on the counter. She offered him a quick, understanding smile and tucked it into the drawer. "I'll call her right away," she replied, her voice calm but edged with tiredness. Another day of back-to-back patients, another stack of prescriptions to fax. When Dr. Lam pivoted to head back, his eyes drifted across the nearly empty lobby. That's when he spotted a familiar pair, a broad-shouldered man in a blue polo, shifting on the bench as he glanced at his watch, and beside him, a girl whose shoulders were hunched so low she looked half her 14 years. Recognition flashed across Dr. Lam's face. "Marco!" he called, striding over with genuine warmth. Marco Halen stood and extended his hand. "Doc, good to see you," he said in that clipped, steady voice of a parent who always felt he had to be in control. "It's Marco Halkin." Dr. Lam chuckled. "You can call me Evan. Outside the clinic, anyway." Then he turned to the girl, whose tangled braids spilled over her shoulder. "And this must be Lucia. I've seen you around the neighborhood, but I don't think we've ever met." Lucia answered with a nearly invisible nod, her face still downturned. She looked small and fragile next to her father's taut posture. Dr. Lam felt a flicker of concern, something beyond the typical father-daughter distance. "We'll get you both in shortly," he assured them, nodding toward the back. "Just tying up a few things." In the exam room, Nurse Rosa was finishing the thorough wipe-down of the ultrasound machine. She paused, her brow furrowing as she lifted the cover off the probe. "Doctor," she said in a low voice, "there's something about that father and daughter." Dr. Lam looked up from his paperwork, his interest piqued. "What's going on?" Rosa set the probe down gently. "When I took Lucia's vitals, her father answered every question. I couldn't even get her name from her, had to hear it from him, and she wouldn't make eye contact, not once." Dr. Lam leaned back, folding his arms thoughtfully. He knew Marco and Lucia. Just 3 houses down, the Halkins were fixtures on his evening walks. Marco always seemed protective, but Rosa's unease lingered in the room like a dropped glass. "I thought it was just fatherly concern," he said slowly. Rosa shook her head, her voice firm. "I'm Mexican too. I understand strict parenting. But there's a wall between them. This isn't culture, it's something else." She handed him Lucia's chart. He read the entries, and his expression shifted to one of sober alarm. 14 years old, showing early signs of pregnancy, he murmured. Rosa's eyes met his. "That's why I'm worried." Moments later, the door opened, and Marco guided Lucia inside. He rested a firm hand on her shoulder, guiding her with a firmness that bordered on force. She moved like she was walking on glass, every step measured. every muscle tense. Marco took the chair beside the exam table. "Thank you for seeing us, especially so late," he said, his tone clipped but polite. "Of course," Dr. Lam replied, gesturing toward the chart on his desk. "What brings you in today?" Marco swallowed, glancing at his daughter. "It's not easy to say, but my daughter is pregnant." Though Dr. Lam had already seen the note in the chart, hearing it spoken aloud made his chest tighten. He looked to Lucia, who closed her eyes as if to block out the world. "Lucia, how have you been feeling?" he asked gently, leaning forward. Before she could respond, Marco jumped in. "She's had morning sickness, she's fatigued all the time, and lately she's complained of stomach pains." His tone was final, as though he'd rehearsed these words. Dr. Lam addressed Lucia directly. "Would you like to answer yourself?" Lucia nodded, voice barely a whisper. I've been nauseous and tired." "And this happened with a boyfriend?" he asked, keeping his voice even. Again, Marco cut her off. "Yes, we don't want to discuss him." His eyes flicked to Dr. Lam. "This stays between us. No one in town can find out." Dr. Lam met his gaze. "Your privacy is my priority. Everything we discuss is confidential." Turning back to Lucia, he continued with steady compassion. "I'd like to perform an ultrasound to confirm how far along you are and make sure you and the baby are healthy. Is that all right?" Lucia's nod was small, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor. Rosa stepped forward, offering a reassuring smile as she helped Lucia onto the table. "You're safe here," she whispered, draping a sheet over her. "Let me know if anything hurts." As the probe touched Lucia's lower abdomen, the tension in the room was palpable. None of them could predict what the screen would reveal, but they all knew that whatever came next would change their lives forever. A soft knock on the door preceded Marco's exit, leaving Lucia alone with Nurse Rosa and Dr. Lam. She wiped the cool gel from Lucia's skin, her voice a gentle whisper, "You're going to be all right, sweetheart." Lucia's face crumpled and tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the edge of the exam table. "She kicks when she hears his voice," Lucia confessed, her voice barely a breath. "I hate that she likes him." Dr. Lam and Rosa exchanged uneasy glances. The comment hung between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Was Lucia lashing out at her unborn child, or at her father? Perhaps she'd internalized Marco's anger about the pregnancy, or maybe her fear and resentment were colliding in confusing ways. "Lucia," Dr. Lam said softly, leaning forward, "what makes you say you hate that she likes him?" But Lucia had already retreated back behind her knitted brows, her moment of vulnerability gone. Dr. Lam straightened, offering her a printed ultrasound image. In black and white swirls, the tiny shape of a fetus floated in the field, but to Lucia's eyes, it looked like an indecipherable blur. She pressed the edge of the paper to her chest and nodded once before allowing Nurse Rosa to help her sit up. By the time they reached the door, Marco was returning, his arms cradling a small paper bag from the pharmacy next door. He guided Lucia by the elbow, steady and sure, as though her daughter were made of glass. Dr. Lam watched them disappear down the hallway, uneasy at the sight of Lucia's hollow posture and the rigid tension in Marco's broad frame. Back in the sterile exam room, Rosa glanced at the clock. 9:01 p.m. "That's it for today, right?" she asked, powering down the ultrasound machine. Dr. Lam nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. "Yes," he replied, his tone distant. He ran a hand through his hair. "That was unusual." Rosa folded the ultrasound printouts into a neat stack, her eyes never quite meeting his. A 14-year-old pregnant for 28 weeks, hiding it from her father all this time. And then that remark about the baby liking him. She shook her head. "What do you think she meant?" He sighed, leaning back against his desk. Maybe she only just confided in him when the pain became unbearable. Perhaps Marco was furious when he discovered the truth, so Lucia resents both him and the child for putting her in this spot. Rosa tapped a fingertip against her wrist. But to say she hates that her baby kicks when it hears him, that seems more than teenage hormones. It's as if she's angry that her body responds to his presence, like a reminder of what she can't escape. Dr. Lam studied the room's antiseptic walls, as if seeking answers in their blank expanse. Mood swings and emotional volatility, yes, they're common in pregnancy, especially in adolescence. But this feels deeper. It might be self-protection. Her body betrays her feelings, and she lashes out at the one connection she still has with her father. Rosa tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I just hope they follow through and go to the hospital tonight. He nodded firmly. They must. Intrauterine growth restriction, irregular heartbeat. These are red flags. She needs continuous monitoring, Doppler studies, specialist consultations, and if the baby's growth is truly lagging, an early delivery might even be a consideration. He tapped the ultrasound printouts. I've given them prescriptions for prenatal vitamins, calcium, and folic acid, but the clinic can't replace an obstetric unit. She sighed, retiring the last of the equipment. I'll call the hospital at first light to ensure they check in. Dr. Lam exhaled. Thank you, Rosa. Let's hope we see them tomorrow. Outside, the late-night streets of Santa Rosa lay quiet under a velvet sky. Somewhere in those rolling hills, Marco and Lucia were unfolding the next steps of a journey neither of them wanted, yet one they could no longer avoid. And as Dr. Lam and Rosa locked up for the night, the unanswered question of Lucia's resentment, her cryptic, I hate that she likes him, lingered in the silent clinic, a reminder that some wounds run deeper than physical pain, and that sometimes, the most vital, healing begins with understanding the heart. That night, after locking up the clinic and watching his nurse drive away, Dr. Lam climbed into his sedan and headed home. Yet, as he turned onto his quiet street, the image of Lucia's tense shoulders kept replaying in his mind. He slowed in front of the Halkin house, its windows glowing, but their car still sat in the driveway. They hadn't gone to the hospital. His pulse quickened. He could barely stomach leftovers, but he forced himself into the kitchen, heated yesterday's chicken pasta, and carried it into his little home office. Under the faint hum of his laptop, he scrolled Facebook until he found Marco Halkin's profile. A few clicks later, he located a Daniela Rivera, Lucia's mother, he presumed, and hesitated only a moment before sending her a private message. Hello, Ms. Rivera. I apologize for contacting you this way. I'm Dr. Jas Evan Lam. I treated your daughter, Lucia, today. I wanted to check that she and the baby are receiving care at the hospital as I recommended. Please let me know how they're doing. Again, I'm sorry for the intrusion. He hit send and exhaled. Professional boundaries be damned. He couldn't shake the fear that something was off. The reply didn't come immediately, so he finished his pasta mechanically, each bite tasting of worry rather than marinara. By 10:30 p.m., he gave up and shut down the laptop, but not before jotting a reminder to call the hospital's obstetrics unit first thing in the morning. He set his phone on the desk, its screen illuminating the dark room. At 11:02 p.m., a notification pinged. It was Ms. Rivera. Dr. Lam, thank you for checking in. Yes, Lucia and the baby are here under observation. We arrived around 8 p.m. She's stable, and the doctors are running more tests to figure out why the baby's growth is behind. Relief washed over him, but a knot remained in his stomach. If Lucia was with her mother, why had Marco told him otherwise? And how had Daniela Rivera suddenly appeared unseen by him in Lucia's life? He typed back, I'm glad they're in good hands. Please keep me updated and let me know if there's anything I can do. As he closed his laptop, his mind raced through every detail. Marco's tight control in the exam room, Lucia's refusal to meet anyone's gaze, her whispered, I hate that she likes him. He wondered if some hidden family conflict lay beneath the surface, one that could jeopardize both mother and child. Unable to sleep, He sat in the dark, staring at the melody of streetlights through his window. For the first time in years, he considered making an unannounced hospital visit, but duty and decorum held him back. Instead, he resolved to be at the clinic early, ready to follow up. If anything didn't add up tomorrow, he would call Daniela Rivera to request her clinic's name and phone number. By 1 a.m., the pangs of exhaustion finally dragged him to bed, but as he lay under the covers, he rehearsed questions for Rosa. Did she ever see the mother arrive? And which obstetric hospital did Marco and Daniela choose? He knew that by sunrise, he'd need answers. In the quiet suburb, nestled among the vines of Sonoma County, the Halkin household remained lit until well past midnight. Behind those glowing windows, truths waited to be revealed, and Dr. Lam, driven by a doctor's oath to protect his patient, would not let the mystery rest. Dr. Lam stood rooted on the Halkin front porch, the damp night air clinging to his coat as the door clicked shut between him and the frightened girl. The echo of Marco's distant voice, mistaking him for a delivery man, still rang in his ears. He watched Lucia's small frame retreat down the hallway, her bare toes barely slipping on the wooden floor before the house fell silent once more. His mind raced. He had already pushed hard, called the mother, discovered the restraining order, and urged hospital care. Yet here he was, still standing on a stranger's stoop in the dead of night, with no clear authority to demand entry. Still, the thought of leaving Lucia alone in that house, pregnant and at risk, was unthinkable. He placed his hand on the doorframe, gathering courage. He tapped lightly, then knocked again, firmer this time. No answer. The soft glow behind the frosted glass remained unchanged. Dr. Lam weighed his options. Forceful entry would breach every ethical and legal boundary he'd promised to uphold. Yet silence could cost a child her life. A sudden rustle of movement inside jolted him. He called gently, "Lucia? It's me, Dr. Lam. I need to know you're safe. Please, open the door." His voice, calm but urgent, carried a tremor he didn't intend. Seconds passed. Then, the door cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to escape. Lucia's wide eyes peeked out. Her face was pale, exhaustion etched into the hollows beneath her eyes. "Please," Dr. Lam whispered. "I just want to help." She hesitated, lips trembling, then nudged the door wider. "They'll be back," she murmured, peering behind him as though expecting her father to descend in fury. "They?" he asked. "My stepbrother, Marco's new wife's son," she said, voice hollow. He stays here sometimes, but Dad's strict. He'd be angry I let you in." Dr. Lam nodded slowly. "Has anyone checked on you since you left the clinic?" She shook her head. "I tried to call the nurse, but they said they'd be back tomorrow." Her hand drifted to her hoodie pocket, and she produced the ultrasound printout. The grainy image felt heavy in his palm. "She's kicking," Lucia said, voice choked. "I feel every movement now, like a reminder Dad hates it." A cold knot tightened in Dr. Lam's chest. "Lucia, where is your mother right now?" Her gaze flickered downward. "She's in Mexico. She goes back for work." Dr. Was. Lam remembered the restraining order and swallowed. "Do you have a friend we can call?" Lucia bit her lip. "My friend Sophia. But it's late," he exhaled, weighing every word. "Listen, I can stay until you're safe. Sophia can come pick you up, or I can drive you to the hospital myself. You don't have to go back inside." She stared at him, caught between relief and fear. "I can't go alone." "Then you won't," he said firmly. "I'll wait here, and you tell me when it's safe." She stepped back and closed the door with a quiet click, leaving him standing on the stoop once more. He settled into a slow, patient vigil, watching the window, listening for footsteps, ready to spring into action if needed. Minutes ticked by as the fog thickened, curling around the manicured hedges and the lonely street lamp. Cars drifted past, unaware that a doctor in plain clothes held the safety of a teenage mother in his hands. Inside the house, the lights flickered as if in response to an unseen tension. Dr. Lam considered calling the police, but he hesitated. He didn't want to alarm Lucia or risk her being sent to a juvenile facility by a father more concerned with his reputation than her health. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door opened again. Lucia stood there, eyes swollen with tears, but resolute. "It's safe," she whispered. Dr. Lam offered her his arm. "Let's go." As they stepped onto the driveway, headlights appeared around the curve. A small green sedan pulled up, its engine ticking in the cool air. Lucia's shoulders sagged with relief. "Sophia," she breathed. A teenage girl jumped out of the passenger side, her face bright with concern. "Lucia, are you okay?" "Doctor." Lam introduced himself quickly, then explained in hushed tones that he would take Lucia to the hospital. Sophia nodded solemnly and offered Lucia a reassuring hug. They piled into the sedan, Lucia in the front seat, Dr. Lam in the back with his medical bag. As they pulled away, he caught a glimpse of Marco's silhouette at the window, watching them go. He refused to let guilt take root. He was saving a life tonight. On the drive to the county hospital, Lucia lay back, hand on her swollen abdomen. Dr. Lam checked her vitals through the rearview mirror. Slightly elevated pulse, but no signs of distress. He flicked on the overhead light and produced another copy of the chart, going over the risks and the need for immediate Doppler studies. Sophia reached back, squeezing Lucia's hand. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. At the emergency entrance, Dr. Lam escorted Lucia inside, personally briefing the triage nurse on the situation before stepping aside. He watched as Lucia was escorted into an ultrasound suite where specialists began the next round of assessments. With the baby's life hanging in the balance, Dr. Lam finally exhaled. He texted Daniela Rivera. "Lucia is with the obstetrics team now. They'll keep me updated. Thank you for trusting me." And then, for the first time that night, he allowed himself to believe that help had arrived exactly when it was needed most. Lights from the police car splashed across Dr. Lam's living room as he stood with the photographs still trembling in his hand. Through the front window, he could see uniformed officers piling out of their vehicles, drawn by his urgent 911 call. "Sir, are you Dr. Evan Lam?" one of them asked as they entered. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, please, follow me. It's at the Halcon residence next door." Within moments, 2 officers accompanied him back into the foggy night. He led them to the Halcon porch, pointing out Lucia's small silhouette through the window. "She's still inside," he whispered. Officer Ramirez motioned to his partner. "Cover the back in case anyone tries to leave." Dr. Lam knocked firmly on the Halcon front door, announcing, "Police! Open up!" Inside, Marco unlocked and cracked the door, his face a mask of feigned calm. "Officers!" Ramirez showed his badge. "Marco Halcon, we need you to step outside." Marco's jaw clenched. "What is this about?" "It's about your daughter's safety," Dr. Lam said quietly. "We have reason to believe she's in imminent danger." As Marco hesitated, the officers moved past him into the living room. Behind them, Dr. Lam saw Lucia huddle at the edge of the couch. Her eyes were wide and red, relief and terror mingled in her gaze. Officer Nguyen knelt beside Lucia. "Hey there, I'm Officer Nguyen. You're safe now, okay?" He offered her a gentle smile. "Can you come with us?" Lucia nodded, eyes flicking to her father. He stood frozen, fury and fear battling on his face. One of the officers raised his voice. "Marco Halcon, you're under arrest for child abuse, statutory rape, and endangering the welfare of a minor." Marco's protest died in his throat as 2 officers stepped forward, gently but firmly placing handcuffs on him. He looked at Lucia, no anger now, only a stunned, broken expression, before being led away. Dr. Lam guided Lucia onto the front porch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "You did the right thing," he whispered. The ambulance lights flashed as paramedics approached. They introduced themselves, speaking in calm, reassuring tones, and asked Lucia about any pain or dizziness. An EMT checked her vitals, while another prepared a stretcher. "I'm Nurse Delgado," Rosa said, jogging up from the clinic where she had met Dr. Lam. She carried Lucia's hospital chart and ultrasound printouts. "We've got everything here." Lucia let the paramedic attach an IV line as Rosa stayed close, holding her hand. Dr. Lam watched, pride and relief flooding him. The child he had sworn to protect was finally in capable hands. Before Lucia was lifted into the ambulance, she turned to Dr. Lam. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was raw, but stronger than before. He knelt to meet her gaze. "You're brave, Lucia. You're safe now, and we'll make sure you're cared for every step of the way." As the ambulance pulled away, Dr. Lam and Rosa stood on the curb, watching the flashing lights fade into the night. The silence that settled was profound, a stark contrast to the turmoil of just hours before. Back on the Halcon porch, the officers read Marco his rights and escorted him into a patrol car. His eyes met Dr. Lam's for a moment, an unspoken acknowledgement of guilt before the door slammed shut. Later that night at the county hospital's obstetrics unit, Dr. Lam checked in with the on-call perinatologist, Dr. Simmons. Standing outside Lucia's room, they reviewed her EKG and Doppler results together. "There's moderate growth restriction, but we've stabilized her oxygen levels. We're starting corticosteroids to mature the baby's lungs, and we'll monitor her around the clock," Dr. Simmons explained. Dr. Lam exhaled. "Thank you. I'll be here first thing in the morning." He peered into Lucia's room through the glass. She lay in a hospital bed, blanket tucked under her arms, eyes closed but peaceful. A small monitor beeped steadily beside her. Outside, Rosa arrived, looking exhausted but relieved. They shared a brief nod, no words needed. Together, they stepped into the nurse's station to update Daniela Rivera on the night's events. At 3 a.m., Dr. Lam finally collapsed into his car, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Yet as he drove home, he felt a sense of closure and hope. He had gone beyond professional boundaries to protect an innocent life, and in doing so, reaffirmed the true meaning of his vocation. In the days that followed, Lucia remained under careful observation. Daniela Rivera was granted emergency visitation despite the restraining order, and mother and daughter began their slow journey toward healing, medical, emotional, and legal. And in a quiet suburban street in Santa Rosa, under the gentle watch of rolling vineyards, Dr. Evan Lam returned to his practice, forever changed by the night he refused to walk away. Detective Morales' voice crackled through the night air as he keyed his radio. "Additional units, we need EMS and a rescue airpad, now." The officers formed a tight perimeter, their flashlights dancing on the Halcon roofline. Below, the inflatable rescue cushion unfolded like a silver lifeboat settling on the driveway, and a small team readied themselves for the worst. On the roof, Marco's grip on Lucia's wrist tightened until her knuckles turned white. She teetered on the steep slope, tears carving tracks down her cheeks. Her other hand pressed protectively against her swollen belly. "Please," she sobbed, voice cracking, "I just want to live." The pregnancy bump made every movement dangerous. One wrong step, and both could tumble. Dr. Lam pressed forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Marco," he called, voice steady but urgent. "I'm here to help her. You don't have to prove anything. Let her go, and we'll get her safe medical care." His words carried a lifetime of late-night house calls, of parents frightened for their children, and tonight, he was no different. For a moment, Marco wavered, his face a portrait of fury and despair. Then, abruptly, his shoulders slumped as the reality of flashing police lights and Miranda rights sank in. He released Lucia's arm, and she collapsed against the angled shingles, immediately clinging to Dr. Lam's outstretched hand. Officer Ramirez rushed up a tactical ladder to reach Dr. Lam's level. Together, they guided Lucia towards safety, each careful step watched by paramedics below. A hush fell over the spectators as Lucia's trembling feet touched solid ground. A medic dashed forward to assess her vitals, while another unhooked her jacket and wrapped her in an emergency blanket. Detective Morales strode up and placed firm cuffs on Marco's wrists. "Marco Halcon," he announced, voice echoing in the still night. "You're under arrest for child abuse, sexual assault of a minor, and endangering your daughter's life." Marco's protest was a strangled sound, half defiance, half resignation, as he was led down the ladder and into the arms of waiting officers. Across the street, Daniela Rivera sprinted toward her daughter, tears streaming. An officer gently guided her around the rescue cushion to Lucia's side. "Mom!" Lucia cried, wrapping her arms around Daniela's legs. Daniela knelt, hugging her so fiercely that Lucia's cheeks, streaked with tears, pressed against her mother's coat. Rosa Delgado arrived moments later, breathing hard but exultant. She crouched beside Lucia and Daniela, checking the emergency bracelet that reading 28 weeks, female fetus, growth restriction. "You're okay," Rosa murmured, brushing Lucia's hair back from her forehead. "We're taking you straight to the hospital now. You're going to be fine." Dr. Lam stood by Detective Morales watching the reunion. He felt a profound relief wash over him. The rescue cushion, the tactical entry, the terrified calls for help had all led to this moment. Babies in utero didn't scream, but Lucia's sobs mingled with Daniela's relieved tears, filling the night with sound. The ambulance doors clanged open, and paramedics carefully lifted Lucia onto a stretcher, securing her in place as they monitored her heartbeat and the babies on a portable Doppler. Dr. Lam squeezed Daniela's shoulder. "She's in expert hands," he said softly. "We'll follow up first thing in the morning." Detective Morales approached, handing Dr. Lam back the evidence bag containing the original photographs. "Thank you, Doctor. Couldn't have made this case without your vigilance." Dr. Lam nodded, eyes on Lucia as she was loaded into the ambulance. "I only did what any of us would do." His voice cracked with emotion, though he stood tall. "Take care of her." As the ambulance pulled away, lights spinning in blue and red arcs, Dr. Lam exhaled the tension of hours, like the very breath he'd been holding. The quiet suburb of Santa Rosa was calm again, save for the echo of sirens fading down the street. In the days that followed, Lucia remained under 24-hour obstetric surveillance. The perinatology team administered growth-stimulating therapies, and a neonatal specialist prepared for preterm delivery if needed. Daniela Rivera, granted emergency custodial visitation, stayed by her daughter's side, holding her hand through ultrasounds, IV insertions, and medication schedules. Dr. Lam visited the hospital ward every morning, often bringing fresh fruit and gentle reassurance. He coordinated with social services to ensure that Lucia would have a safe, supportive environment after discharge, far from the house where her mistrust had been born. Rosa joined him with folders of medical notes and referrals to counseling services for trauma and hope-filled parenting classes. Marco Halcon's criminal charges proceeded swiftly through the Santa Rosa legal system, and he was denied bail due to the severity of the offenses. Daniela Rivera was appointed Lucia's legal guardian, and she petitioned the court for sole custody. A judge, sworn to protect the minor's welfare, granted it, citing the need for a stable, nurturing home. Months later, Lucia gave birth to a premature but healthy baby girl who spent only a few days in the neonatal intensive care unit before joining her mother in a private room. Daniela held the newborn, her tears of sorrow transmuted into tears of joy. Dr. Lam, invited to the quiet celebration, watched as the three generations, mother, daughter, and granddaughter, embraced in a moment of triumph over darkness. In the garden outside the hospital, under the soft California sun, Lucia and Daniela planted a small sapling, an emblem of growth, resilience, and new beginnings. Alone for a moment, Dr. Lam placed his hand on the young tree's slender trunk, feeling its promise, a promise he had helped keep by refusing to look away. And in that gentle breeze, he heard the quiet heartbeat of a life saved and knew he had honored the true calling of his profession. Detective Morales cleared his throat as he stepped into the hushed waiting area alongside Officer Nguyen. Daniela looked up, clutching her daughter's favorite blanket, her eyes swollen from crying. Dr. Lam rose to greet them. "Detective," Dr. Lam said quietly, "is Lucia stable?" "She's resting now," Morales replied, folding a case file under his arm. "We secured Marco's statements upstairs, but I wanted to get yours on record before he's booked." Dr. Lam nodded. "Of course." He gestured toward a row of padded chairs. "Shall we sit?" Daniela moved to Lucia's side, stroking her daughter's hair as they took their seats. The overhead lights hummed softly, and somewhere beyond the double doors, Lucia's monitors beeped a steady, reassuring rhythm. Detective Morales consulted his notepad. "Doctor, you were the first to suspect abuse and performed the initial examination. Can you walk me through what you observed medically and behaviorally?" Dr. Lam began, voice steady but gentle. When Lucia arrived, she was 14 weeks into pregnancy, later than expected for her age, and already showing signs of intrauterine growth restriction. On ultrasound, I noted a small gestational sac consistent with 28 weeks gestation, but the fetus's measurements were well below normal percentiles. In addition, the fetal heartbeat was irregular, suggesting arrhythmia. These conditions require immediate specialist care. He paused, looking at Daniela. Behaviorally, Lucia avoided eye contact and would not answer questions directly. She showed fear and deference toward Marco at every turn. It was only after I insisted she speak for herself that she whispered, "I hate that she likes him," indicating her unborn child's response to Marco's voice, a chilling clue of her true relationship with him. Officer Nguyen took notes. Detective Morales looked up. And at the scene tonight, Marco attempted to hold Lucia hostage on the roof. He threatened to kill both her and the baby, then pushed her off the roof when he realized police were closing in. Dr. Lam swallowed. She landed on the safety cushion. Paramedics assessed her immediately. Her vitals were stable, no fractures, and the fetal heart rate picked up as strong, though still irregular. I was able to listen to both heartbeats in the ambulance, and there were no signs of internal hemorrhage. My officers found 4 photographs on Dr. Lam's person, Morales continued, handing the evidence bag across the table. They show Lucia in various stages of undress next to Mr. Halcon. These, along with his confession upstairs, form the basis of our charges. Daniela exhaled, relief and horror mingling on her face. "He was our daughter's father," she whispered. "I never thought—" Dr. Lam placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Predators hide behind normalcy. You did the right thing by coming tonight." Detective Morales closed his notebook. "We'll need your written statement, Doctor, and possibly to testify at trial. Ms. Rivera, we'll also need a statement from you about custody and your relationship to Lucia." Daniela nodded, suddenly resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect her." An orderly peered through from the examination room. "Dr. Lam, Dr. Vasquez would like to see you and Ms. Rivera now." Dr. Lam stood. "That's our daughter's doctor. Let's go." They entered the snug consultation room where Dr. Elena Vasquez was reviewing a fresh ultrasound printout. Her brow was calm but concerned. "Lucia experienced no trauma-related injury. We've started corticosteroids to accelerate lung development in case of early delivery, and will monitor her for arrhythmia around the clock. With proper care, both she and the baby have an excellent prognosis." Daniela's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Dr. Lam exhaled in relief. "I knew she was in good hands." Detective Morales lingered by the door. We'll continue our investigation, but for now, focus on recovery. We'll keep you updated on the legal proceedings. As they left the room, Daniela enveloped Lucia in a gentle hug and whispered promise after promise that she would never leave her side, that she would keep her safe, and that together they would heal. Dr. Lam watched them go, the weight of the night lifting. In the quiet hallway, he paused, placing a hand on the nursing station desk. Patient charts, an open medical journal, and a framed photograph of his own daughter greeted him. He smiled faintly. Tonight, his calling had meant more than medicine or protocol. It had been about restoring hope and saving 2 lives from darkness. And as the first light of dawn crept through the hospital windows, Dr. Lam made his way to the chapel at the end of the corridor to offer a silent prayer of thanks for courage, for justice, and for the new beginning awaiting a mother and her child. Detective Morales folded his notebook and looked around the small conference room. Across from him, Child Protective Services Rebecca Miller leaned forward, concern etched on her face, while Daniela Rivera sat rigidly at the table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Dr. Lam cleared his throat and began. It started this evening when Lucia came to my clinic with her father. At first, I thought we were dealing with a difficult but typical teen appointment. Her refusal to speak, the way Marco answered every question for her, struck me as odd. Then her whispered line, "I hate that she likes him," felt like a cry for help rather than teenage drama. When Lucia slid me those photos, everything became clear. Detective Morales nodded. We found that hidden room in the basement, just as you suspected. Cameras, recording equipment, every detail of the abuse was documented there. And in Marco's bedroom, hundreds of images of Lucia, some dating back years. He tapped the file on the table. This has been going on far longer than anyone imagined. Daniela buried her face in her hands. How could this happen? How did he keep me away from her for 10 years? Tears slipped through her fingers. Rebecca Miller spoke gently. Predators like Mr. Halcon isolate their victims. They erode trust. They cut off support, friends, family, school, until the child thinks they have nowhere else to turn. Detective Morales turned back to Daniela. Miss Rivera, we need to understand how Mr. Halcon gained full custody. With a shaky breath, Daniela rose to speak. After our divorce 10 years ago, I was a single mom working the graveyard shift at a casino. We struggled. I thought underground poker games might help, just a little at first, but it became an addiction. One night, I made a terrible mistake. I left Lucia, just 7 years old, home alone. The house was raided, and she was there. Marco seized the moment. He painted himself as the stable parent, and a judge gave him custody. I was only allowed supervised visits. Then he moved to Santa Rosa, got a restraining order against me, and systematically cut me out of her life. Rebecca Miller nodded sympathetically. We see this pattern often. Now that you've regained some stability, we'll work on restoring your relationship with Lucia. Before anyone could respond, Dr. Elena Vasquez entered, her white coat crisp against the muted hospital lighting. I'm Dr. Vasquez, she greeted softly. Lucia's condition is improving. We've begun steroid injections to mature the baby's lungs and medication to stabilize the fetal heartbeat. She's severely malnourished and shows signs of chronic stress, but there's no evidence of placental abruption from the fall. She'll need close monitoring for the next 48 hours, but physically, she's going to recover. Daniela let out a long, shaky breath. Thank God. Dr. Lam offered her a gentle smile. She's in the best hands. Detective Morales cleared his throat. Can we see her? Dr. Vasquez nodded. She's been asking for her mother and for Dr. Lam. They filed into the dimly lit hospital room where Lucia lay propped on pillows, IV lines gently pulsing at her arm, monitors beeping in time with her weakened heartbeat and the baby's faint flutter. The contrast between yesterday's terrified child and today's quiet strength was startling. Daniela approached slowly. "Lucia," she whispered, "my brave, beautiful girl." She sank to her knees beside the bed and took her daughter's hand. Lucia's eyes glistened with a new light. "Mom," she said, voice trembling but firm, "you came back." Daniela's tears replaced any doubt she had ever felt. "I never stopped trying." Dr. Lam stood at the foot of the bed, giving them space. Detective Morales and Rebecca Miller remained respectfully at the door. After a few moments, Lucia sat up and looked directly at Dr. Lam. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me." "You did all the hard work," he replied. "Your courage to speak up saved you and your baby." Detective Morales stepped forward. "Lucia, I know this is difficult, but we need your help to build our case against your father. Would you feel comfortable telling us everything you remember?" Lucia glanced at her mother, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's okay," Daniela said. "I'm right here with you." Lucia took a deep breath. "I want to tell the truth." Rebecca Miller offered a gentle smile. "Take your time. If you need to pause, just let us know." Lucia nodded and began, her voice quiet at first, but growing in strength. "There was never a boyfriend. My father, he's the father of my child. It started soon after he got full custody. He pulled me out of school, said he'd homeschool me, but there were no real lessons, only enough to answer questions if anyone asked. He kept me locked in that basement room with no windows, cameras watching every move. He'd tell me nobody loved me but him." Her voice wavered. He convinced me the outside world was dangerous. When I tried to call for help, he said I was ruining his life. Every time I cried, he'd show me pictures of me crying and laugh. Rebecca's eyes filled with sadness. Detective Morales exchanged a look with CPS. Lucia continued, swallowing hard. "Then I found out I was pregnant. He told me to be grateful because the baby would be mine alone, that if I ever tried to get help, he'd make me disappear." Daniela's hand shook. "My baby." Lucia raised a trembling hand. "But tonight, I slipped the photos to Dr. Lam. I refused to stay silent." She looked around the room. "I'm done hiding." Silence fell, profound and solemn. Detective Morales nodded and closed his notebook. "Thank you, Lucia. Your statement will be added to the evidence. We'll make sure you and your baby are protected." Dr. Lam stepped nearer, placing a comforting hand on Lucia's shoulder. "You're safe now, and we'll see this through together." Rebecca Miller stood. "CPS will open a case to ensure you have a stable home, therapy, and educational support. Mr. Halcon will not be permitted contact." Lucia leaned against Daniela, exhaustion finally setting in. "I can rest now," she whispered. Daniela kissed her forehead. "Rest, my brave girl." As the team quietly departed, Dr. Lam lingered to check Lucia's IV line and adjust the fetal monitor. Outside the room, he and Detective Morales exchanged a knowing look. Justice had begun, and this family would heal. In the soft hospital corridor light, Dr. Lam felt the weight of the night lift. He knew the road to recovery would be long, but Lucia's courage and the unwavering bond of mother and child had lit the way forward. Dr. Lam sat silently as Lucia recounted the horrors of her father's abuse. Years locked in a hidden basement room he built for the purpose, the whispered threats, the forced isolation. She described how, upon learning of her pregnancy, Marco first threatened an abortion, then claimed the baby as our child, growing oddly protective. When she started kicking, Lucia said, voice trembling, she only responded to his voice. It made me sick. I hated that she answered him. She placed a gentle hand over her swollen belly. But she's innocent. It's not her fault. Daniela squeezed her daughter's hand. Of course not, Lucia continued. Over the past fortnight, She'd been racked by stomach pains and dizziness. Marco ignored her until she could barely stand, then, reluctantly, brought her to Dr. Lam's clinic. Detective Morales leaned forward. "The photographs," he prompted. Lucia explained how she'd stolen them. Images of her naked, catalogued by Marco in a locked box, slipping copies to Dr. Lam while her father showered. "I didn't know who to trust," she admitted, "but when Dr. Lam came to our house, I thought maybe he could help." Dr. Vasquez, having just reviewed Lucia's monitoring strips, offered a relieved smile. "The medication is stabilizing her heart rhythm, and your own vitals are improving, Lucia. That's excellent news." Lucia looked around the room at the assembled team. Detective Morales, CPS worker Rebecca Miller, Dr. Vasquez, Daniela, and Dr. Lam. "What happens now?" she asked. Ms. Miller spoke first. "You'll remain in the hospital until you're cleared to go home. After that, we'll assess the safest living situation for you and your baby." "I want her to come home with me," Daniela said firmly. "I've prepared for this for years. Room, savings, everything." Ms. Miller nodded. "Given the circumstances, that seems appropriate. We'll conduct a home evaluation, and barring any issues, you'll be Lucia's custodian." Lucia's voice wavered as she asked, "And my father?" Detective Morales offered a reassuring nod. "He's in custody. With the photographs, hidden room, and your testimony, he faces multiple felony charges: child abuse, sexual assault, incest, endangerment. He won't be released for a very long time." A complex mix of relief, sorrow, and closure passed across Lucia's face. "What about the baby?" she whispered to Dr. Vasquez. "She's doing everything we can," Dr. Vasquez promised. "Over the next few weeks, we'll continue steroid injections for lung development, monitor her heart closely, and focus on your nutrition. You'll give her the best fight possible." Lucia drew in a steadying breath. "I want to keep her," she said, surprising everyone. "I know I'm young, but she's not responsible for how she came into this world. I won't let her suffer for what he did." Daniela squeezed her hand. "We'll raise her together, me, you, and your daughter. She will be loved and protected, always." As the night deepened, Detective Morales and Ms. Miller prepared to leave, promising to return the next day. Dr. Vasquez went off to check on other patients. Daniela settled into the chair beside Lucia's bed, unwilling to leave her side. Dr. Lam gathered his things, wearied but resolved. "Dr. Lam," Lucia called softly as he reached the door, "thank you for listening, for seeing that something was wrong." He paused, struck by the young girl's resilience. "I'm just glad I could help," Daniela added, her voice thick with gratitude. "You did more than help. You saved them both when everyone else looked away." Driving home through Santa Rosa's silent streets, Dr. Lam reflected on the night's events. His willingness to push beyond professional boundaries had made all the difference. The Halcon house, now a crime scene marked with yellow tape, would forever change the neighborhood's sense of safety. Yet while the community grappled with the horror that had gone unnoticed for years, Lucia and her unborn daughter had a chance at a new beginning. He entered his home, exhausted but at peace, and lay down to rest. Medicine's primary mandate might be to do no harm, but he had learned that sometimes truly doing good requires more: the courage to see hidden suffering, the compassion to act, and the resolve to protect those who cannot protect themselves. As sleep claimed him, he thought of Lucia and her baby, victims of unspeakable cruelty, now poised on the threshold of healing, supported by a doctor who refused to turn away.